Microsoft is coming out and literally saying they have Nvidia GPUs collecting dust because they do not have enough facilities to actually put them into.
The reality is that construction is hard and building for data centers for AI is very difficult because of the...
But isn't budging. Microsoft is doubling down on AI with plans to invest about $146 billion in infrastructure in 2026, which is approximately twice last year's $88 billion. This is going to be a disaster for them.
Microsoft has Nvidia GPUs collecting dust. Not broken, not waiting on software, physically sitting in storage because there are no facilities ready to put them into. That is not a rumor. That is Microsoft admitting it out loud. And while that confession was quietly slipping out, the company was simultaneously announcing plans to spend $146 billion on AI infrastructure in 2026, roughly double the $88 billion it spent last year. The same company that cannot find a building to put its chips in is doubling down on the biggest financial bet in its history. Something is seriously wrong here, and almost nobody in the mainstream is measuring it. Here is the number that changes everything. Only 33% of announced data centers in the United States are actually under construction right now. That means roughly 79 gigawatts of promised AI capacity, the kind of capacity that gets celebrated in presidential speeches and investor presentations, is sitting in planning documents, permit files, and pre-construction limbo. It does not exist as a building anyone could walk into. And the language being used to hide this is doing enormous work. The phrase, under construction, can apparently mean anything from a fully active build-out to a single steel beam on an otherwise empty lot. The announcement is the product. You do not need to build a data center to benefit from saying you will. Look at Stargate Abilene in Texas. This is one of the most loudly celebrated AI infrastructure projects in the entire country. It was announced in July 2024 as a 200-megawatt facility. By mid-2025, a presentation was confidently claiming that 1.2 gigawatts would be online before the year was out. As of early 2026, the project has been sitting at 2 buildings for more than 6 months. The gigawatt milestone never came. The timeline quietly dissolved without any of the fanfare that came with the original announcement. This is not a small startup overpromising. This is backed by some of the most powerful names in the industry, and it is running dramatically behind every public commitment made on its behalf. Then cross the Atlantic. OpenAI made a very public declaration that it would build the United Kingdom's largest supercomputer in Tyneside, England. That announcement generated breathless coverage, political enthusiasm, and a strong impression that something historic was already taking shape. As of March 2026, the site is a scaffolding yard filled with pylons and scrap metal. Bloomberg confirmed on April 9 that OpenAI officially paused the entire UK Stargate project with no restart date and no revised timeline. The reason is one brutal number. UK industrial electricity runs at roughly 25.85 pence per kilowatt-hour, translating to about 33 cents, compared to roughly 8 cents per kilowatt-hour in states like Texas or Virginia. Running a hyperscale AI facility in Britain costs nearly 4 times what it costs in America. No press conference fixes that math. Sam Altman himself stood on stage at a BlackRock summit in March 2026 and told a room full of investors that anything at this scale has so much stuff that goes wrong and called AI infrastructure, so expensive, you need so much of it and you have to commit so far in advance. Those are not the words of someone who feels in control. OpenAI's own CFO has said the company could have grown even faster with more compute, meaning the bottleneck is not intelligence, it is infrastructure. The models exist. The buildings do not. Nvidia sits at the center of all of this, selling chips into a pipeline the physical world may not be ready to absorb. Nvidia claims it will sell $1 trillion worth of GPUs between 2025 and 2027. At current rates, that represents roughly 1.6 gigawatts of IT load every quarter, each of which requires nearly 2 gigawatts of total power capacity to actually run. But America only added roughly 3 gigawatts of actual data center capacity across all of 2025. The arithmetic of what is being sold versus what can be powered does not work. And if any of Nvidia's customers can cancel orders, the entire structure becomes extremely fragile, extremely fast. Because if you look around the AI industry, no one else is really making money other than Nvidia and the memory manufacturers. Not even close. Microsoft's own CFO Amy Hood conceded in late 2025, publicly, "I thought we were going to catch up. We are not." Microsoft also froze 1.5 gigawatts of self-build projects, paused a $3.3 billion facility in Wisconsin, and cut hundreds of megawatts worth of leases with private operators. CoreWeave is carrying more than $11 billion in debt at brutal interest rates, while a key Texas data center faced delays that threatened the revenue needed to cover those same obligations. Sightline Climate Research shows between 30 and 50% of all U.S. facilities planned for 2026 now face delays or outright cancellation. Meanwhile, the backlash on the ground is organized, legally sophisticated, and spreading. Between March and June 2025 alone, community opposition helped block or delay $98 billion in data center projects. At least 25 projects were canceled in 1 year because of local objections. 188 organized community groups now operate across 40 American states. Microsoft just lost something to Nvidia that no amount of money, no CEO speech, and no product launch can ever bring back. Not the number one spot on a valuation chart. Not a quarterly earnings record. They lost the world's belief that Microsoft is the company that owns the future of technology. And once the world stops believing that about you, you don't get it back. Here is what actually happened. Nvidia's stock market value crossed $3.3 trillion, overtaking Microsoft and making it the most valuable company on the planet. Just days before that, it had already overtaken Apple as the second most valuable. Think about what that means. A chip company that most people had never even heard of 5 years ago just walked past two of the most powerful technology empires ever built, back to back, within the same week. That is not a market correction. That is a verdict. And the man behind all of it is Jensen Huang. He co-founded Nvidia back in 1993 with one simple goal: make video games look better on computer screens. That was it. Nobody in that room could have imagined that those same chips would become the engine of a global AI revolution worth trillions of dollars. What changed everything was one key realization. AI systems need to perform millions of calculations at the same time, simultaneously, without stopping. That is exactly what Nvidia's GPUs were built to do. Regular processors handle one task at a time. Nvidia's chips handle thousands at once. When AI researchers figured this out, Huang was already 3 steps ahead of everyone. While the rest of the world was still thinking about gaming, he was quietly building the infrastructure for a revolution nobody else saw coming. The numbers tell you exactly how fast this happened. Before ChatGPT launched in late 2022, Nvidia was worth around $400 billion. By June 2023, it crossed $1 trillion. By February 2024, it crossed $2 trillion. Just months after that, it blew past $3 trillion, officially overtaking Microsoft. That is nearly 10 times its value in just 2 years. No company in history has ever grown this fast at this scale. Apple took 1,793 days to go from $1 trillion to $3 trillion. Nvidia did the same thing in under a year. Now here is where it gets painful for Microsoft. Bill Gates, the man who built this company over 5 decades, told current Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella to stay completely away from OpenAI. When Nadella wanted to invest $1 billion in the company behind ChatGPT back in 2019, Gates looked him in the eye and said, "You are going to burn this $1 billion." He thought AI was not ready. He was wrong. Nadella ignored him, pushed forward, and Microsoft ended up pouring over $13 billion into OpenAI. But here is the brutal twist of irony that should make Gates deeply uncomfortable. To run all of that AI on Azure, Microsoft has to buy Nvidia chip. Microsoft committed to spending over $80 billion on data centers in 2025 alone, and a massive chunk of that goes straight into Nvidia's pocket. The company Gates built is literally funding the company that just dethroned it. That is not bad luck. That is a trap with no exit. Nvidia controls somewhere between 80 and 90% of the AI chip market right now. Every major player, ChatGPT, Google's AI tools, Meta Systems, Amazon's cloud infrastructure, all running on Nvidia chip. They are not buying from Nvidia because they like the brand. They are buying because there is no real alternative that comes close. And Huang locked this in back in 2007 when Nvidia released something called CUDA, a software platform that let developers build AI applications directly on Nvidia hardware. Today there are 5 million developers worldwide whose entire workflow runs inside Nvidia's ecosystem. AMD and Intel are years behind in building that kind of loyalty. This is not just a hardware moat. It is an entire world built around that hardware. But cracks are forming. Real ones. Nvidia's stock has gone sideways for months. Export restrictions on the H20 chip hit the company with a $4.5 billion charge in a single quarter. The ban on selling chips to China backfired strategically because it forced China to accelerate its own chip development through Huawei's Ascend chip. The export controls created the very rival they were supposed to prevent. Then OpenAI deployed a live production model called GPT 5.3 Codex Spark on Cerebrus hardware, not Nvidia. Not in testing. In production. That is OpenAI, Nvidia's most important customer, publicly telling the market that serious AI work can run without Nvidia chip. And Meta, which had $72 billion in planned GPU spend in 2025, signed a multi-billion-dollar deal to use Google's TPUs inside its own data centers. Custom ASIC shipments from cloud providers are projected to grow 44.6% in 2026, while GPU shipments grow just 16.1%. The thing eating into Nvidia's future is growing nearly 3 times faster than Nvidia itself. Meanwhile, Microsoft is bleeding on the consumer side too. Windows 11 has become a disaster. Copilot is embedded so deep into the operating system you cannot escape it. Only 3% of Microsoft's 450 million Office users actually pay for Copilot seat. After a strong earnings report where Azure grew 39% and revenue hit $81 billion in a single quarter, the market cap still fell $360 billion in one day. Investors are not rewarding the revenue. They are punishing the spending. $37.5 billion burned in one quarter, 2/3 of it on chips, most of it flowing directly to Nvidia. This is what Microsoft actually lost. Not a ranking. The narrative. For decades, the most valuable companies in the world were the ones writing the software, building the platforms, owning the operating systems. Now the most valuable company is the one building the physical hardware that all those software giants cannot survive without. The world shifted from valuing what runs on computers to valuing what makes computers run. Gates saw the first shift and built a $3 trillion empire around it. He missed the second one. And Jensen Huang was already sitting in the winner's chair before anyone realized the race had even started. Samsung trusted Microsoft for 6 years. 6 years of pre-installed apps, default cloud backup, and a partnership that was supposed to take on Apple. And after all of that, Samsung just pulled the plug completely. OneDrive is getting removed from every Galaxy phone. The deadline is April 11, 2026. And Microsoft is about to lose access to over 100 million devices. This is not a small update. This is not a quiet policy change. This is one of the biggest breaks in tech partnership history, and most people have no idea why it actually happened. Let's go back to 2019. Satya Nadella walked on stage at the Galaxy Note 10 launch in New York. The crowd went crazy. Two of the biggest names in tech joining forces. Samsung had the hardware. Microsoft had the cloud and software infrastructure. The deal made sense on paper. OneDrive became the default cloud backup on every Galaxy phone. Microsoft Office came preloaded. Teams integration was built in. Microsoft got direct access to Samsung's massive user base. Samsung got world-class cloud services and reportedly around $891 million annually from the agreement. For a moment, it genuinely looked like the partnership that could challenge Apple's ecosystem. But what Nadella didn't say on that stage was already becoming a problem behind closed doors. The first signs were technical. OneDrive syncing was clunky. Files would upload at random times, draining battery and burning through mobile data. Samsung's own engineers kept finding bugs that Microsoft was painfully slow to fix. Users started complaining loudly. Samsung's customer support logged over 890,000 complaints about OneDrive in 2023 alone. But the technical frustration was only the surface problem. The deeper issue was control. When Samsung signed this deal, they handed Microsoft a direct pipeline into their users' devices. Every photo a Galaxy user backed up, Microsoft saw. Every file synced, every location tag embedded in those photos, Microsoft had all of it. And Samsung had zero visibility into how that data was being used. Then came the behavior that made Samsung's leadership genuinely uncomfortable. Microsoft was getting aggressive on Windows with OneDrive, moving users' local files to the cloud without clear permission, redirecting documents users thought were stored locally, and in some cases deleting files when users hit storage limit. Samsung watched all of this unfold and asked one very important question. Why are we letting them experiment with this same behavior on our phones? Every time Microsoft pushed harder on Windows, Samsung realized they were essentially giving Microsoft a testing ground to perfect those same tactics on Galaxy devices. And meanwhile, Samsung Cloud, which Samsung had built years before this deal, was sitting dormant. Samsung had literally told their own users to ignore their own service and use Microsoft's instead. For what? The moment everything changed came when Samsung discovered that Microsoft was using OneDrive data collected from Galaxy devices to train their AI models. Samsung users' personal photos, documents, location data, and private files were being fed into Microsoft's Copilot development pipeline. No explicit consent. No compensation to Samsung. No transparency whatsoever. Microsoft was building AI products that would directly compete with Samsung's own plans, using Samsung's own user base as the fuel. A Trinity College Dublin privacy study published in late 2024 confirmed it. Microsoft apps pre-installed on Samsung phones were collecting and transmitting more data than any other pre-installed software on those devices, more than Samsung's own apps, more than Google's app. The findings hit Samsung's board like a grenade. Samsung didn't just quietly cancel the deal. They confronted Microsoft directly. They demanded Microsoft stop collecting data from users who never opened their apps, stop transmitting data without explicit consent, and make privacy controls actually accessible to normal users. Microsoft's response was essentially no. Their position was that the data collection was necessary for service functionality and that users had technically agreed through terms of service buried during phone setup. Samsung gave them an ultimatum. Microsoft let the partnership die. They calculated the data was worth more than the relationship. That decision infuriated Samsung's leadership. According to leaked internal communications, one Samsung executive described the situation plainly. Microsoft made clear they value our users' data more than our partnership. That's not a partnership. That's exploitation. In early 2025, Samsung made it official. OneDrive integration would be removed entirely from Galaxy devices. Not phased out. Not kept as an optional download. Removed. Android Authority found the evidence buried in Samsung's One UI 8.5 code. Strings of text reading sync with OneDrive ending soon. Countdown notifications being prepared. A hard cutoff date. April 11, 2026. After 6 years, it's done. Samsung Cloud is coming back as the default, and this time Samsung has made clear they are not giving another company control over their users' data. The consequences for Microsoft are significant. They lose default positioning on over 100 million active Galaxy devices. They lose the habit loop they spent 6 years building, all the users who got comfortable with OneDrive and started paying for storage. They lose enterprise standardization across Android, and they cannot do anything about it. Samsung owns the ecosystem. Microsoft has no leverage here. Worse, Xiaomi and Oppo are already quietly removing Microsoft apps from their upcoming devices. The domino effect is starting. If you are a Samsung user backing up to OneDrive right now, April 11, 2026 is your deadline. Your photos and files will not automatically